was chosen to be emperor. Not having the same tolerance for Christianity as his predecessor, Decius ordered all Christians to renounce their Lord and Savior or suffer the consequences. Tryphon was one of those arrested and tortured in an attempt to shake their faith. Tryphon endured all suffering with these words, "Oh, when shall I become worthy to make an end for the name of Jesus Christ?" He was finally beheaded in 250 AD. Tryphon is viewed as the patron saint of those who labor in the fields. This 3rd century shepherd symbolizes the loving calmness one can receive from a proximity to the Lord. The Orthodox Weekly Bulletin on Ancient Faith Radio.
Welcome to Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls with your hosts, Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne Lowe, where we will connect our Orthodox faith to day-to-day living in relationship to our family, our work, and our view of ourselves. Father Nicholas is the priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Jacksonville, and Dr. Roxanne is a licensed clinical psychologist who uses her extensive training in private practice. Your questions are welcome by calling 855-237-2346. That's 855-237-2346. Here now is Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls. We are so delighted that you're joining us on this Tuesday evening. My name is Father Nicholas Lowe. I'm the parish priest of an awesome community known as St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Jacksonville, Florida. This is a ministry of our church, and I'm joined by my wife and lovely co-host, Dr. Roxanne Lowe, who's a clinical psychologist. And as many of you know, you've been part of the Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls family for years now. We really brought this ministry, and really the impetus behind it was just trying to find ways to help you in your walk of faith, to kind of give you some tools that merge both faith and psychology to guide you in your walk of faith. I think so often many of us are just looking for some practical Christianity, some ways that we can apply what we're experiencing, what we're worshiping, what we're hearing on a Sunday morning, and applying it in our everyday lives. And so we're so grateful that you're joining us, and we do encourage you that if you do enjoy our ministry, please do us a favor, help us to share God's light, share this with your family and your friends. We do also encourage you that if you're wanting to find out more about us and maybe some future retreats that we're going to be speaking out, where we're going to be speaking out, you can go to our website at thelows.com. That's LOUHS.com. You can also register for our daily inspirational messages. And I think many people have already done this, but if you haven't already, during the show right now, I'd encourage you to go to our website at thelows.com, click on that subscribe button, and all you have to do is simply put in your email address, and every single day you'll receive a daily inspirational message from us. And it just, as we mentioned earlier, it's just practical Christian tools that you can apply in your everyday life. As always, we encourage you to stay connected to us also on our social media accounts. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. They're all under the headings of The Lows. Tonight, we really want to invite all of you to join the conversation as we do every single time that we're on the air, and that is you can call in by calling in at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-AF-RADIO. We just encourage you to join the conversation. We believe at our core that true growth happens in the conversation. So we want this to be a conversation, and we invite you to. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com.
Well, good evening, everybody. Tonight, we are so excited to be talking about a topic near and dear to our hearts and my heart. We're talking about motherhood in honor of the feast day of the falling asleep of the Virgin Mary, our Lord's mother, and in many ways, our mother. We're here tonight to speak about how to navigate the demands of motherhood. And oh, those demands are high.
Absolutely.
We can think back to those days with our kids being 12 and 14. It feels like it was yesterday. And we're talking about these demands from the perspective of not losing sight of ourselves and our spiritual life in Christ as mothers. And tonight we are honored to be joined by two mothers who decided to put their experience and wisdom into words. They've taken their collective experience personally, spiritually, and professionally, and have written a book entitled A Sacred Beginning, Nurturing the Body, Mind, and Soul During Baby's First 40 Days. And you can find that book right here on Ancient Faith. Sarah Brangwyn is an Orthodox Christian, wife, mother, and psychotherapist. She practices as a licensed professional counselor and is board certified in movement therapy, specializing in reproductive mental health and holistic wellness. Her co-author, Sasha Rose Oxnard, is also an Orthodox Christian, wife, mother, and physician who practices in family medicine and specializes in prenatal care and pediatrics. Sasha also writes a blog for Ancient Faith on trying to raise children to love God and to love their faith. And it's entitled Shepherding Our Little Flock. So Sarah and Sasha, we're so excited to have you both on the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're so happy to be on.
We are excited to hear this conversation. So tell us the story behind why you both wrote this book.
I guess I will get started because we actually write a kind of funny preface in the book about the actual story of how it happened. I think we both came to the book from a little bit of different angles. For me, I definitely had noticed in my first two pregnancies or in my first two postpartum days that I was really missing connection to the church. And in the church I grew up in, we very much don't go to church for the first 40 days and, meant to be time for us to be home and with baby. And for me, I thought, how can I go through this transition in my life without the church, and in my mind at that point, the church was very much this physical place that I went to that provided this healing. And I think, in many ways through becoming a mother and even also just in the past year where we have at certain points been separated from our church, I think my understanding of the church has grown so much that I have a 5-month-old and in my most recent 40 days, I thought we're never separated from the church. Our homes, our families are the church, and while we may perhaps not be going to the physical space of the church during 40 days, we're not separated from the church ever. But so that was very much, I wanted to come at the book from some sort of spiritual connection during those 40 days. So I really thought, and I bought a bunch of books and I said, I'm going to make a scrapbook with like Lives of the Saints and some
I read about
quotes.
that.
And every day of my 40 days, I'm going to read one of those. And, surprise, surprise, that didn't happen.
That was so, I was laughing as I read that because how can so many mothers can connect to that story, right? They have these great intentions and then it just, as you said, collects dust while we're busy running from thing to thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Sarah and I were really blessed to have our third children at just around the same time. So she had her third child. And when she was in her 40 days, I said, Sarah, we have this, I have this idea for, I wanted to make this book for you and I didn't make it. And, then she was like, we should write a book. That'd be such a great idea. And, and then later, completely forgot that she'd said that. And anyway, it was just a very funny story, which we write about in our book. But Sarah, I don't know if you want to talk about sort of how you came to the book. I think it was a very different kind of a feeling, and the two of them, I feel, melded so beautifully in the final product that came out.
Yes, I will. So I always wanted to be a mother and was really overjoyed when I had my children, but I was really blindsided and just unprepared for how I was as a mother, and that I was so tired. I didn't ever know how much sleep I needed. I didn't know how anxious I could be over a small child. I just really struggled a lot in ways that I wasn't prepared for. I had worked in schools as a psychotherapist. I had many younger siblings. I was around babies. I babysat. I had thought I knew so much about children and about babies and the care that it would take to raise a child, but I wasn't prepared for me as a mother. And I think that was
Mm.
kind of the hardest thing. And so when I had my third baby, I had learned a lot. I had grown a lot through um, the trials, and thank God for my first two children and all that they gave me. That
Mm-hmm.
I grew through that, and through my marriage. That um, when I had my third daughter, I kind of knew what I needed to make it a really positive experience, and I stacked myself with help. I was prepared in a different way, and having gone through it, I just marveled really at how much better I did with the third
Mm.
child. And I thought, I wish every mother could have this experience, the
Mm.
experience that I went through. I had to go through to get the experience. And so, really, Sasha and I tried to do the next best thing um, by writing this. And what Sasha shared that she needed really became the meat of our book, which is the spiritual wisdom. That's not our
Mm.
wisdom. It's really the wisdom of the church, the quotes in the scripture, and the latter, which is such a treasure that Sasha
Mm-hmm.
introduced me to as we were trying to write the book. And that's really what I feel the book can offer, is this spiritual underpinning for what motherhood is.
Isn't that so beautiful? I love how you shared that the church, really provides us. I think, these early on, these 40 days, as we call them, that the church really provides us as an opportunity to our to moms. And I think for so often it's like, the narrative becomes, well, I can't come to church for 40 days. It almost becomes some sort of a rule that we have kind of instituted, where, if you just simply leave it at that, it becomes something that you can't do, as opposed to what it's actually offering you to do. And you have this opportunity that the mother's connection with her child, and really what this 40 days does is not only as allows a physical, and really the impetus behind this was this 40-day was an opportunity to for the body to heal, for the physical body of a mother to heal, but also to give that opportunity, that connectivity. And you see so many, both of you are very well, one as a therapist, you have a great deal of experience with children. And then obviously, Sasha, as a pediatrician, you have experiences in the medical field. You know how significant it is those first couple of weeks just with the child, and the importance of just the connectivity that happens there. So I look at that 40 days as an opportunity that the church is once again offering a safe place and an opportunity to really hone in on that very first church, as you mentioned earlier, that of the family. And I think it's something so beautiful that you highlighted earlier.
So in your book, you talk about the birth of a child as sort of being one of the most momentous and, of course, joy-filled experiences in a woman's life, but how often that joy can be tempered by the reality and demands of being a new mother. And Sarah, you were mentioning this earlier, that the first child. I mean, we're amazed at. We didn't realize how much sleep we needed, and we didn't realize how anxious we could become, and how much I can relate to hearing all of that. But one of the things I think is so beautiful about your book is, you sort of reference this this nature that we all have as human beings, but then the importance of not just trying to survive this time, but really thriving in our souls. And maybe you could weigh in on this a little bit, but what can readers expect from this dichotomy that you guys present? What could they expect from reading this book? And Sasha, do you want to start that off?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. I think we try really hard in the book to be very vulnerable, to tell some of our struggles and to share that with people, because I think it's such a gift for people to know that others are also struggling, others are also there, especially in those early days. You can feel so on your own. And we also, I think both of us, and certainly one thing I feel like writing this book has made me appreciate is that actually motherhood, when I became a mother and when I was first going back to church with my littlest baby, I got to church and, he was making noise during the sermon, and I felt like I was a distraction. He cried the entire way to church, and I thought, I'm never going to be able to go to church again. Like, my church happens to be 40 minutes away. It's a long ride with a screaming baby. And I thought, this is it. How is my spiritual life going? This is going to be a complete distraction from my spiritual life. And I think what I've appreciated in my now only 7 years as being a mother, my oldest is only 7, is that it's tremendous benefit to my spiritual life. And I think that can be this sort of hope, this beacon that actually our children are these incredible gifts for teaching us first about our own passions that we don't necessarily know. Sarah shared some of, the things that we all of a sudden realize, wow, I didn't realize how anxious I could be, or how irritable, or how angry, or, my temper and all these things. But they can also, just in order to be able to give our church to them, we have to understand our faith, and we have to live our faith so intentionally that I feel like it's a tremendous gift. And there's a wonderful woman, Hannah, I'm forgetting her last name. She does the podcast, all these things. And she said, during Lent, she was going to church. She went a few times to church by herself, and she thought this will be great. And then she got to church without her kids, and she realized how distracted her mind was, and that her children really pull her into the service because you have to point out the different prayers, or you're really there with them. So I think I'm digressing a little bit, but I do feel like the book is aimed to really help moms to help realize or re-realize that being a mother is part of our spiritual journey, that it's a gift from God to help us to become our true selves spiritually, to move into communion with Him. And I really very much think of it as a reference. The book that inspired me to read St. John's Divine Ladder was the Ladder for All Walks of Life. Now I'm forgetting the title, Sarah. The wonderful transition.
30 Steps to Heaven.
30 Steps to Heaven, yes.
Yeah.
Which really, describes each of the steps in such layman's terms for people that aren't monks or, nuns. And I reread that book every year. And every time I read it, I think, oh, yeah, oh, wow, that's me. Oh, and then, the world comes in and completely forget all of it. And so I hope that this, even since our book was published, I find myself dipping into different chapters thinking, right, this is going to teach me patience, and this is what this is about, And so I guess, I don't know if I'm exactly answering the question, but I think that would be our hope, that this book is sort of a reference, and that it's being vulnerable. It's showing how hard this is. We had an incredibly hard time, and how this is this tremendous gift, and in our time we will use it. And we describe golden rules, and one of them is we start where we are, wherever you're at, just you can use this moment to move forward on your spiritual journey.
Yeah, and I think, just to kind of build on what you were sharing, and Sarah, maybe you can add to this as well, is
sure.
I think, so often you as a man, kind of observing from the sidelines and watching, I know with Roxanne and our 2 children, there's a lot of pressures and expectations placed on moms, to be able to kind of handle all of this all at one time. And, sometimes, even kind of showing that kind of what some may consider to be what some moms may consider as a personal weakness, and or showing that vulnerability, allows them to be to almost expose themselves in a way that they're not that they were maybe not ready. And I think many people may not realize just all the pressures that are not only placed on moms, or especially early on, but even the pressures that the moms themselves put on themselves to try to navigate through that process. And maybe, Sarah, you could speak a little bit about that as well, because I would just love to hear how how you guys both kind of faced that, because it became such an impetus to write the book.
Of course. I just want to go back to what you said earlier, Father Nick, about the church giving this time. And I think it speaks to what you just said about the pressures mothers face, and Sasha writes a little about this, because we both came into our understanding of that time offered by the church a little differently. Sasha had different feelings about it than I did. And in researching, we discovered that, mothers felt all different ways. Some people thought it was a punishment, or they didn't think it was, maybe archaic, or, it was about, women being impure or different things. But what we realized in looking at the book, or researching for the book, and understanding it's really a universal thing. taken throughout many cultures,
Exactly.
that women need time to heal and recover, and that babies need this time. We also call it the fourth trimester to
Mm-hmm.
really come into the world. And so the church gives us a blessing to take the pressure off. We don't have to come back that first week with a baby dressed in, church
Mm.
clothes. We don't have to try and look presentable. Many of us are trying to breastfeed or struggling if we can't. We don't have to try to feed our baby in
Mm-hmm.
church or be leaking or any things that might happen to new moms in those early weeks. We really are given a gift to take that pressure off. And I think taking that time and giving ourselves permission to say, okay, I don't know everything. I don't have to do everything. Right now, I need to heal and rest, can
Mm.
set up, and this is my hope, set up a time so that as we go through motherhood, we're able to take that time to care for ourselves and know when the
Mm-hmm.
pressure is getting too much. Okay, I have to go back to the basics. I have to feed myself and my children. I have to pray. I have to sleep. I have to do these basic things so that we can all function. And I think if you ask, how do I try to manage that? I mean, I struggle still. I'm in
Mm-hmm.
no way able to do all the things that I even offer to other mothers to do. I try my best, but I think the thing that we really hope comes through, is that we ask for help from the Lord, first and foremost, and from
Mm-hmm.
those around us,
Amen.
and that we focus on caring for ourselves. I think that is how you take the pressure off, is recognizing, okay, in order to care for everyone else, I have to do what I need to do to be able to do that. And that
Mm-hmm.
is sleeping, eating, praying, having a
Mm-hmm.
moment to myself, whatever it is.
Absolutely. You are listening to Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls, and we are speaking with two extraordinary women, two extraordinary moms, about their book. It's called A Sacred Beginning, Nurturing Your Body, Mind, and Soul During Baby's First 40 Days. We're speaking with Sarah Brangwyn and Sasha Rose Oxnard about this book. You can find it right here at Ancient Faith. Actually, you go to store.ancientfaith.com and find it right there. I as you were just speaking, Sarah, I was thinking to myself, I've been very fortunate to be a priest now for almost 13 years now, and we've you church countless children in that time, and every one of them you look with such beautiful fondness at these moms who are, I look at them and I just think, wow, all the things that they're carrying, all that and obviously I think as we're approaching the feast day of the Virgin Mary this Sunday, a major feast day in which most Christian churches actually, this is one of those few feast days where almost the entire Christian world celebrates August 15th as the falling asleep of the Virgin Mary. That you look and you kind of just think, oh my gosh, just how extraordinary she was, and as a mother, and as a young mother, and trying to navigate all that she was doing. And I think that in some ways, I hope that she becomes an encouragement for moms, because she, she takes on all that that you as moms end up enduring, and she goes through the whole process of bringing her son into the temple after 40 days and following as the prayer says, the Jewish rites of purification that they would have. But I think, just on a spiritual level, how do you stay spiritually grounded? Because I can only imagine, just especially with young newborn children, you're being tossed and turned in such a million different directions. You want to be that amazing mom. You have feedings to work with. You have sleeping patterns. How do you spiritually kind of take time for yourself to grow in your walk of faith? And maybe Sarah, if you want to start us out, then Sasha,
Sure.
you can go. Yeah.
For me, I try to do a number of things. The first is, now that my kids are a little bit older and I am sleeping mostly through the night, I do try to have a morning routine, and
Mm-hmm.
that really helps to set the stage, for my day. I like to get up and have, moments by myself for quiet prayer. I like to take a walk. I like to write. That's when I did a lot of
Mm-hmm.
my writing. Um, and I think, you know, at whatever stage you're at, whether your, quiet time is one moment where you can just take that moment to set a prayer of intention for the day and ask the Lord for help, and ask that you remember to do that throughout the day. Even, Lord, help me to remember you throughout my day. And Sasha and I both really like the prayer of the Optima Fathers. I think that's how you say it.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that's a really good prayer. You only have a short moment to say that prayer, because it really asks for to be able to go through the day with the Lord by your side and to handle whatever comes. And I think that's the hard thing. We don't know what's going to happen in each of our days. In the book, we focus a lot on how do we weave prayer into our life so that, we as moms can't go off most of the time and have quiet solitude. Most of us don't have that, especially if you're home and you're not working and you don't leave your kids, or you're, homeschooling or whatever lifestyle a mother has. Many of us don't have alone time as we, might want to have for prayer. So you bring your kids into prayer. You pray while you're driving. You pray in moments of difficulty. You give thanksgiving. I think that's one of the things we also try to focus on, is how important gratitude is. And to try and, as a discipline, find where we're grateful in the day and recognize that that is a blessing from the Lord. So
I love that. I love that.
I'm still in my spiritual walk. I have a long way to go. So, it's even in confession, as I was writing this book, I said, I'm writing all these things, but am I even worthy of saying these things? Because, we're all on a path and trying. So,
well, and I think that's one of the things that we're all challenged with, is that even as we're writing, that writing becomes a mirror to ourselves, and as and how well we are doing what we're writing about, what we're sharing about, what we're preaching about. Sasha, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well on that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like for me the biggest thing has been just weaving prayer into everything, and sort of like Sarah was saying. But recently I was actually in looking up some of the citations for our book, I was reading one of St. Paisius's books on family. And he talks a lot about leaving room for God, and that there are people that, we get so anxious about our kids that we're on top of every single little thing. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I get anxious about plenty of things, almost as if acting as if there's no God, acting as if there's not another person, that the Lord's not looking over our shoulder, that the Lord's not, caring about our child more than we even care about them. And I think, I wrote a blog post on this, and I've been thinking a lot about just this idea of leaving space for God. And, I'll have a moment where I'll be feeling really anxious about something, and I'll just say, Lord, can you help me out with this? Almost like I'm talking to my husband or my partner or whatever, that I'm saying, could you, I really need help in this moment. And I feel like before having children, my prayer was very formulaic, I opened my prayer book. I said that the specific prayers, not that I always did, but that was sort of, to me, prayer was, very routine, the specific prayers of the church fathers. And I feel like I rarely spoke to God just as I am. And I think that is, I don't know if that's other Orthodox experience. I think, there are certain other Christian, groups that certainly do a lot more personal prayer or all personal prayer. And I think potentially we have something to learn from that in the Orthodox tradition. I'm just finishing up your book, and I really enjoy at the end of each section the prayer, It's just, we can just speak to God. Speaking to God is what we should be doing. We should teach our kids to speak to God. And so I think for me, my spirituality right now, my connection as I have children is just talking to God about everything that's going on. And I agree. I say that, Lord, may I grant grant me to greet the coming day of peace, and that whole prayer, just sort of, to rely upon your holy will, to realize that your holy will is part of all things. Really that's a big thing as things come up, as struggles come up, saying, and again, this kind of goes, I think we'll mention our golden rules at some point, I hope, in this hour, but one of our golden rules is use the struggle to grow in faith and love. And the idea that when you're having a hard moment with your kids, you have a choice. And we don't always make the right choice, and we're fallen human beings, and sometimes we yell and we wish we hadn't, but we have a choice to choose love in that moment and to choose patience. And every time we make that choice, we're moving towards God. And I think, I see it right now as just my church on Sunday is just the icing on the cake, and that everything else is part of the spiritual journey.
That's beautiful. I really love hearing what you both are saying. I mean, this is sort of the life of constant renewal. This isn't something that we fix, we get permanently. It's something that we are constantly seeking. And it requires tons of mindfulness and discernment and this constant conversation with God, all throughout the day, woven through the day, like you guys are saying. And I love even the idea of leaving space for God. And that is something so important. As I was looking through, some of the passions that you guys mention throughout the book, I noticed one was worry. And part of me wanted to jump right to that exact day and okay, what are they going to share with me about worry? Because once you have a child, the anxiety that a mother feels, you do almost feel, you forget that someone else is in charge besides you. You don't have to fine tune, manipulate every single aspect of what is happening to them because there's somebody else who's in control. And when we remember that, it can be so relieving of pressure. So you're listening to Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls. For those of you who've just tuned in, we are speaking with Sarah Brangwyn and Sasha Rose Oxnard, who co-authored a book entitled A Sacred Beginning, Nurturing the Body, Mind, and Soul During Baby's First 40 Days. But I wanted to ask you both, when you sort of look at having used the Ladder Divine Ascent by St. John Climacus as the spiritual guide, you sort of talk about how the ladder offers a bit of a parallel between attainment of holiness and the spiritual growth we can strive for as moms. But in your book, Ascending the Ladder, you guys talk about is not a linear process. It's sort of more of a guide that sort of plants these seeds for things that we're going to contend with maybe later in life. And we have to sort of come back to this again and again until we sort of fully internalize the lesson. And our whole life's process is about getting there, right? This isn't something we read about, we fix it, we do it. Tell us a little bit about how your book kind of parallels that and more or less how readers can approach the book. How should it be read?
I would say that, for a woman, I've had this question actually from a reader. She was 3 weeks postpartum and wanted to know, should I jump in, at 3 weeks or should I start from the beginning? And I recommended to start from the beginning because I think we try to lay a foundation for how to conceptualize ourselves as mothers in this spiritual journey. And so I think reading it, because like you said, it's not a linear process. So even though we have day 1, day 2, day 3, the only things that are actually on the calendar in that way, day 1, we have birth, and then day 8, we have the naming prayers, which, many women have those said on day 1 or not at all, or at the end when they're being churched, or, so it can be very fluid even for that structure that has been set out. And Sasha also said, as a reference, I actually looked up avarice the other day just to read some of the quotes we'd written, because I think, it isn't a linear process, and we gain on our journey and we fall back and we go forward. And, Sasha referenced our golden rules, and the last one is we start where we are. So wherever we are in our journey, we just keep moving. We just aim to go forward. And so I think, the practicality of the book is, yes, we talk about some of the early things that happen right after pregnancy and birth in the early days. And, as you get closer to being more out and about and your body healed, we'll talk about those things. But in terms of the spiritual aspects of the book, those are eternal and will go through weaving into our lives, as we live, as long as we live.
I laugh a little bit because Sarah and I have, we have many similarities and we're dear friends, and we also have big differences. And sort of, I know that if I got this book, I would be like, I have to read I have to catch up to where I am, and I'm going to read the whole thing during the 40 days. I need to get it done by day 40. And Sarah, Sarah's much more laid back in that sense. And I just laugh because I think that really you need to, we even talked, we have a whole section on self-care because it is such an important thing. And we had this whole discussion because there's really an introduction and a preparation for postpartum time, which very much was the gift of Sarah. I would not have thought to put that in. And we had self-care in there. And I said, Sarah, what if they're getting this and they don't think to start reading it until after, and they'll miss that and she's like, well, I would go back and read that. And I was like, well, I don't think I would, people just have different ways of reading things. So I think, I do think taking it slow makes sense, but whatever way you want to read it, I might just gobble it all up, in a couple of babies' naps or in the middle of the night because I just want that companionship. And if you want to do that, go for it. And you might take you to your baby's first 2 years to read that book if you want to read it in its entirety. But I hope one of the reviewers or a few of the reviewers kind of described it as like, daily meditations, and that's really what we want them to be, is just a little hand holding each day or whatever day you're able to pick up.
And I think that's so Orthodox in so many ways, because I think one of the things that we did even in our own book is we tell people that, if you're looking for a book that you're going to read all at one time, then our book would not be that book, because it's one of those things that you kind of you read a little bit, you ruminate, you reflect on it, and then you apply it in your own life, and then you kind of go forward. And I think your book does exactly the same thing. I think it allows the reader, really to kind of be, just to kind of almost let it be a mirror for them, and just to kind of give them some space to kind of process and do that. And I think that's one of the things that I think is going to be so helpful to the readers who are going to be reading the book. But before we go any further, I just want to remind everyone that we are speaking with Sarah Brangwyn and Sasha Rose Oxner. They're the two authors of a brand new book here at Ancient Faith called A Sacred Beginning, Nurturing Your Body, Mind, and Soul During Baby's First 40 Days. We invite you to join the conversation this evening. You can call us right now at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. I wanted to just kind of go into this. We actually have a caller. Caller, are you there?
Yes, Father.
Hi, how are you?
You hear me?
Yes, I can.
How are you doing? Father bless. I'm Tiberiu, a Romanian guy, called before.
Yes, how are you? Yes, how are you?
Good. Yeah,
welcome
I want to do more a little bit orthopraxia than orthodoxia. That's the reason I stay away a little bit.
Yes.
So, Father, a little comment. Not comment. I heard something, Constantinos Zalalas, the Greek theologian from Pennsylvania where I live. I heard something very, very nice today about the Dormitional Mother of God. But actually, the birth of Jesus Christ. He said, imagine in the human history is the first time when God's heart is beating next to a human being heart. I thought that was beautiful. And I now go to your show right now with the ladies. I think it's amazing when the mothers, like my wife and everybody has these kids, the first time they think about the same thing, the first time when that child, his heart or her heart is beating next to my heart, that's amazing. Something you cannot explain, and that heart could be Saint Anthony, could be Saint Nectarius, could be, and that's amazing, yeah.
That's such a beautiful thing.
That is beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, Tiberius. I think that is such a beautiful imagery, Roxanne, just to hear the two beating hearts right next to each other, that of the Virgin Mary and that of Christ. It's extraordinary. And it's also, I think you could just go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just one more thing is coming to my mind right now. If we look in the icon, the feast day right now, the Dormitional Mother, we see Christ with a little baby, and my interpretation I heard is her soul, right, Father? Mother God's soul, and that's, you see. So the heart, Jesus Christ is beating next to the heart of our mother, and at the end, her soul is, Christ is gonna. I think it's amazing. It's kind of same thing, but I don't know how to explain. It's too much for me,
Oh, you're so cute. Yeah. No, I think it's beautiful. I mean, I think that's why, even if you listen to the hymns, and it's really kind of just to kind of digress a little bit from, but I think this is still under the umbrella of what we're talking about tonight, is that if you listen to the hymns of the Dormition, obviously we are at a service that one may argue is a funeral, or it is the falling asleep of the Virgin Mary, but the hymns are such jubilation. One of the hymns says, "Come, let us clap our hands," in this joy that we're celebrating of all of the life of someone who changed all of our lives, that became the vessel of our Savior, who changed all of our lives. And I think you're absolutely right. I love that imagery, Tiberius, and I think that you're so, the way that you shared that with what Father had shared earlier is really a testimony to the deep roots of the Orthodox faith, that where we can look and see these two beating hearts next to each other, and have the beauty of that. So thank you so much for calling and being such a loyal listener to Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls. I wanted to kind of shift a little bit and to deal with a topic that I think sometimes is a topic that sometimes moms are afraid to discuss, and I think sometimes even within the field of, even sometimes even within churches, we are uncomfortable in speaking about it, and that is postpartum depression and anxiety. What would you both, and I'd like to start obviously with Sarah, but definitely Sasha, to hear your thoughts on this as well. But you write about postpartum depression and anxiety in the book, but what would you like mothers to know about that? I think some moms out there that may be listening right now, who have their children who may be struggling or may have struggled with this, and maybe look at themselves as inadequate, that there's something lacking on the inside of them. What would you want to tell them?
I would say, the first thing I would want to say that, if a mother is suffering, and that can mean many things. It doesn't necessarily mean she has postpartum depression. But if she is suffering, if she is anxious, if she is sad, if she's wondering if she made the right choice in having her baby, if she's wondering if her family and baby would be better off if she weren't there, if she's not able to care for herself, if she's anxious, if she's having scary thoughts, any of these ways that women suffer, I think it's so important to tell somebody. Because when we sit with those thoughts and feelings alone, they can grow so much bigger and they can feel so much scarier. And when we open them up to first our prayers and asking God for help, and then we open them up to our partner, to our mother, sister, friend, doctor, whoever it might be, I think it can really help to normalize, because we know that within, certainly in the first 2 weeks after birth, almost, I think 70 to 80% of women can experience what's called the baby blues, which is a state of feeling overwhelmed, crying easily, feeling sad, and really, suffering. And when it goes on past that time, which it, can, and feels very overwhelming, it's so important to know that in talking about it, you can understand what's going on and you can get help in that. And so that's, I think, the most important message I would want moms to know, is that you don't have to suffer alone. You're not alone in this. And we're, truly, we're never alone. We have people around who want to help. We have also always, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and the Theotokos to support us. But in our communities and our families, there's people who can help.
I love that. That is such great advice, to just tell someone, and to first tell God in prayer, but to reach out to support. I think that we have a difficult time living as authentic beings with true vulnerabilities, and putting words on things that we feel are going to make us seem like we can't handle it, or there's something wrong with us. And this is not something that people are used to putting words on, but how life-changing it can be for someone to support you through it, and to know that you're not alone, because most of the time in those moments, women do feel very alone. And so in thinking about this book, and, for all the women out there and all the new mothers out there who may be already feeling this sort of level of difficulty in taking on the new challenge, the new milestone, the joy of motherhood, but also the demands of motherhood, I read something really beautiful in the book, which sort of talked about this as this shouldn't be sort of looked at with all the virtues and the passions of the soul and the body and the things we have to sort of check ourselves on. And it shouldn't be looked at as a spiritual to-do list, just one more thing to sort of put on our plates. And I loved the way you guys really talked about this as sort of the natural process of motherhood will do this for us. If we're walking through this, we're staying connected to Christ, that the natural process of motherhood will bring us through the journey. But I wanted you guys to sort of just talk about that a little bit, that just really echo that for the readers, that you don't exactly want this to be approached as another thing for mothers to do, but more a natural, more organic process that they will reach in being a mom. So maybe you guys could comment on that a bit.
Sasha, do you want to start?
I can start a little bit, just also in tailing off of what Sarah was just talking about. I think that, we talked a lot in writing this and co-authoring this about our vignettes that we put in, our sort of clips about our own life. And it's interesting because I think as a family physician versus as a therapist, actually there are very different ideas of boundaries, in terms, and Dr. Roxanne, you may agree with this. I think in therapy and psychotherapy, there are very clear boundaries of, not sharing to a certain extent, at least traditionally, whereas as family docs, there's less of that in our training, and I'm much more likely to sort of share, as long as I think it's beneficial to the patient and not just about me, share with my patient, my struggles. And so I share in the book a story about right after my first was born, and I had a very honest moment of just feeling like I could not do this. And I showed up at my postpartum visit 2 weeks, and I was just a puddle of tears, and my midwife took my baby and looked at me and, sort of prescribed a couple of, pumping milk and going to some moms groups, and how that really helped me. But I share every time I see a woman at their postpartum visit, what a struggle I had with my first child. And I do think it's a tremendous gift to be honest with people about how hard things can be and how joyous too. But we tend to be more comfortable sharing the joys and less comfortable sharing the difficulties. And as a listener, obviously we all know when somebody only shares difficulties, and it can become, very challenging to hold that. But being honest with people, how you doing? Oh, fine, great, but how are you doing? Well, actually, I've been having a hard time, or, whatever you want to share. That's such a gift to someone. And so I going into your question now, I think being honest with ourselves about just the season of our life that we're in. And we mentioned that in the book too, this idea of I just wrote a blog post about this, so it's on my mind, but sort of living in the season that you're in, that when you have a tiny baby, there's just stuff you can't do and get done. And it's funny because I have now, my fourth child is 5 months old, and so I'm back in the stage of I can't do a lot of things, and I am not in the water playing with my kids in the way that I'd like to be, or whatever those things that you can't do. Lots of other things. I'm up at night, what are the things that you just have to let go of? And as the child grows, so will you. And I, Sarah and I always laugh about who wrote what in the book, because sometimes I read something and I think, that's got to be her. That's so great. I love that, and I was reading it today because we're actually recording our audio book of it, and so I read a big chunk of it sitting in my neighbor's closet today. I tried to find a quiet space, and this idea that we're given these adorable little babies who are so high maintenance, and as they get to be bigger and bigger, and sort of less adorable as they're pinching us and, yelling no or whatever they're doing. We're moving along with the process, just as you described, Dr. Sam, this idea of, if we stay present, if we stay connected with them, with the moment, with God, we'll find our way. The idea that tomorrow has enough troubles of its own. Just do now, and you just do this. And I think that that's so much more manageable. And if these little vignettes can sit in your mind and maybe you come back to something. I even have found, because we turned in our manuscript before my child was born, and then since my child was born, I reread it several times, and I keep coming back to little things, that I'll think, oh yeah, like that was really well said, or these things that are helpful to me, whether or not it was me that said it or Sarah that said it, who knows, but these things can come back to us over time. They can sit. So that's really why we created the 5 rules, because there may be nothing you remember, and maybe you just want to flip over to those 5 rules and be like, oh, right, just the basics, And I would encourage Sarah to maybe touch on the 5 rules, because I know we'd love to share those.
We were just gonna ask you guys to dive into the golden. Okay. We've been waiting for the moment for the golden rules of motherhood. Yes.
I will share those in 1 second. I just wanted to comment on what you said about the spiritual to-do list, because the last thing that either one of us want is for this book to feel overwhelming, for a mother to say, oh my gosh, I have to think about being a saint. I have to be a perfect mother, and I have to fulfill all these virtues and these vices. I have
watch
to
every passion.
Deal with these passions. I think that's really the last thing we're hoping someone will feel. And also a little bit why I shared earlier my experience in confession, because these are our strivings, our struggles. We, are not sitting atop saying, this is what we've learned and hope you all get here. I think it's important to say for anyone reading the book that it is a journey and it's not a to-do. It is hopefully the foundation for which you can go forward and do the best you can do. So with that, we have our golden rules, which I think we had initially intended Sasha to share about how we came up with them, because I forgot a little bit. So she might share that after, but I will share the rules because we found they just kept popping up again and again. And there's 5. Our first one is that prayer is the way. And really, I think we say somewhere in the book, if you summarize the book, it would be to pray, because I think Father Nick, I'm sure you could share about this, but prayer is so much. It is our connection to God. It is how we can sit and be still. It is our reflection time. It is our hope time. It encompasses so much of who we are and can be. So we really encourage that. As Sasha shared, we say to use the struggle to grow in faith and love, because there's no doubt as a new mother and as a human being that we will encounter struggle. And we offer, and I was really grateful to find so many words from saints about the struggle and how crucial it is actually to our spiritual lives, and how a life without struggle isn't really going to give you the depth of growth and ultimately joy that we hope to experience through salvation. Our peace brings peace. So really, it goes back to self-care too. Our spiritual life will affect our whole family. If we are chaotic inside, if we are stressed and anxious and not intentional and mindful about how we're acting with our families, we're not going to have a very peaceful home. And I think really taking and thinking and making time to work on our own peace will create peace for our children and our spouses and anyone else who we encounter. This next one, I think Sasha really came up with the wording, which is we are in God's hands. Do you want to share about that one a little bit, Sasha?
Well, it's interesting because for my birthday or for Christmas or something like that, Sarah gave me this beautifully printed card, and it initially had our 4 golden rules, and I looked at it because it's by my desk, and it says, our children are in God's hands. So that was our first version of it, just this idea that, like we were talking about before, that we're not the only one in charge. In fact, we're way less in charge than we think we are. But then throughout the book, it kept coming up. It's not just our children. We are all in God's hands, right? God is above. Our priest that we grew up with, that I still my priest often says God is above. And it's like the most comforting thing in the world. God is above, and scary things happen. God is above, wonderful things happen. God is above. And so, that has been a really interesting progression of that one till we are in God's hands.
I love that.
And I can just go on to say the last one, which is we start where we are. And it's interesting. I was reflecting with Sarah. I remember very specifically where we were as we came up with this idea. And we were really thinking that we wanted to have something to tie through the book and sort of tie the book together and noticing that themes kept coming up. And we were like, what are these themes? And for me, it's just been so cool to have these. I think about this all the time. I mean, so our last one is we start where we are. This idea that, it's funny because in writing the book, there are 2 parishes close to me that have very different, neither of which I attend, but both of which I have good friends at, and I've attended at, sporadically sort of to say hello or for a certain feast day or something. And one, I feel like, they just have sort of different feels to them. And I remember in writing this book, I kept thinking, well, I need to be really, show that I'm really trying to be good in these ways for one of them. And then, I don't know, it's just trying to imagine who your audience is so hard. And so that's why it's just the only thing you can do is be yourself. And I think, when Sarah said the our peace brings peace, our peace brings peace bit, when she's just said that, it made me think it does. And sometimes our peace is not there, and sometimes it is. And when it's not there, we teach forgiveness because we ask for forgiveness, and our children have the opportunity to forgive us, or our families have the opportunity to forgive us, or our neighbor, whatever has happened, right? So it's not that if we don't have peace at all times, our house is a mess. It's just that sometimes we can work to have peace, and sometimes we won't, and we can work to have forgiveness and repentance. And so that we start where we are is, if you're already doing all of these things that we talk about, great. Maybe there's some extra little thing. If you are nowhere near any of this, just choose one little thing that you think might be helpful to incorporate, wherever you are, just start.
I love that. And I tell you, I just want to congratulate the 2 of you because you're such extraordinary mothers, and hearing about your story, hearing your vulnerability in this book, and then just hearing how the 2 of you, the passion by which you speak about motherhood, just congratulations. And once again, to our listeners this evening, the book is called A Sacred Beginning, Nurturing Your Body, Mind, and Soul During the Baby's First 40 Days. You can find it right here at Ancient Faith. Just go to store.ancientfaith.com. I want to again thank you, Sarah Brangwyn and Sasha Rose Oxnard, for your time this evening. We're grateful that you joined us this evening. And I do want to just also remind everyone that our next show is on Tuesday, August 24th. We're very blessed to have Metropolitan Gregory of the Carpatho-Russian Church, who's going to be speaking with us about faith and science, 2 topics that are very near and dear to us. Metropolitan Gregory is a scientist and obviously a hierarch in the Orthodox Church, and so we're excited to hear him discuss that. And finally, as we are closing out our show, we do want to let you know that in the month of September, we've got some really cool special announcements that we're going to be sharing on our very first show in September. That's on Tuesday, September 14th. You do not want to miss that show. We're going to share with you some exciting news that the 2 of us have been coming up with. And we also encourage you to just check out our daily inspirational messages. Again, you can go to thelowe's.com and click on subscribe. Thank you to Matushka Trudy for always producing our show. We are so grateful for her and all the great people at Ancient Faith for producing tonight's show. God bless you all, and stay strong in your walk of faith.
Orthodox music, lectures, prayers, and more on Ancient Faith Radio. Thanks for your support.
This is Ancient Faith Today with Father Tom Soroka, a weekly live call-in show addressing the issues of our day from a distinctly Orthodox perspective. You can join the conversation by calling in at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Father Tom is the priest at St. Nicholas Orthodox Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and welcomes guests from across the globe to discuss important topics of interest. Here's Father Tom.
Welcome to Ancient Faith Today. This is Father Tom Soroka, and I'm so glad that you're with us this evening. We'll be taking your calls in a bit at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. Matushka Trudy will be answering your calls tonight, so please